Okay, I think it starts recording automatically at 9 a.m. So I better start because we're being recorded. And I'm very excited to be here to talk not about Drupal. No one's leaving? Everyone's still here? We're going to talk this morning to get us all awake and excited about UX and content strategy. And what better way to start a conference than to talk about what you shouldn't do when you get home from a conference. So I don't know if you've ever done this. You go to a conference and your head is just exploding with all these new ideas, and you get back, and then Monday after you're just thinking, I have to go back and I have to add a design system because everyone's doing that. Oh, and we have to do decoupled, everyone's talking about it, and there's like 20 new modules I heard about that I want to start installing. So today's presentation is actually about what not to do on your website. Like, it's kind of an antidote. Like, don't just go and implement all the new trends and things you're hearing about. Here are some ways to step back and think a bit more strategically before implementing new strategies in UX and in content. So for those of you who I haven't met, my name's Suzanne Dergacheva. I'm the co-founder of Evolving Web, and I'm also involved a lot in Drupal marketing. So if you have ideas about the new Drupal.org, or you want to write new landing pages for us and help us spread the word about Drupal, I would also love to talk to you about that. But I do run a full-service agency, Drupal certified. We're a Drupal certified partner, and we work a lot in higher ed and government, public sector, and enterprise. So come stop by our booth. We're actually do a tiny plug. We're giving out these doodle boards, like a drawing pad. So very fun, not very techy little handout we're giving at the booth. And these will be great for sketching some of the ideas that I'm going to be sharing in the presentation. So I have 4 big ideas that I want to help us dissect today. And these are all probably trends that you've heard of, that you've maybe read about in blog posts or seen fly by on LinkedIn, like, oh, you have to do this new thing that we're doing on our website. Flattening your navigation. I'm going to be talking about digital storytelling, using design systems, and also Revenge of the Homepage, which is the one that's about AI, in case you were wondering, what is the AI tie-in going to be in this presentation? Sorry, spoiler alert. Okay, so first off, flattening your navigation. So this is actually a term, flat navigation, that I think I heard on the first ever web redesign project that I did for a medical society way back like 17 years ago, one of my first Drupal projects. It was like a Drupal 5 to 6 migration. And people were talking about like, oh, should you have a big menu or like a flat menu? Like, should you have lots of levels or not? And I feel like things have gone back and forth many times. So this is a very, very interesting design topic and debate we could have. And this is a menu that I found recently in browsing around and looking for examples. And this is from the Oxfam website. And this I would call a mega menu, right? This is a doozy of a mega menu. Not only do we have multiple columns of links, we have a whole section description, and we decided, oh, what we actually want people to do is simply donate now. So we're going to just stick a whole block with an image right into the menu. So who here is the proud owner of a mega menu? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah, okay, lots of mega menus in the room. Who has like 3 or 4 levels in their menu? That's another kind of mega menu. It's not as visual, but like lots of complexity here, right? And so I feel like there's been this backlash against the mega menu because you design a menu like this and you just think, what am I going to do? I have to fill up this menu with links. I better have lots of content. I better come up with more ways for people to give. And adding the emphasis, because now there's so many links under the Give Now ways to give section, that I have to actually emphasize what the most important one is. And so people come to a bit of a realization that their users are having content overload when they use the menu. And they say, oh, actually what we should do is flatten the menu. So maybe some of you have heard of this term when you're going through a information architecture process in the discovery phase of a project, and people are like, no, what we need to do is flatten our mega menu. And so we've seen also menus. I think this is a beautifully refined menu. I'm a bit biased. We just redesigned this website for a museum. And so this is the visit section of the menu. And it still has that design look of like, oh yeah, like there's images in the mega menu. There's like it kind of catches your attention. The admission hours are right there, but we actually only have a few links. We still had to do the work of like honing down our menu a bit and not cramming it full of stuff. So it does feel fresh, even though it's a mega menu. So that is an option as well. But rather than saying, okay, we're going to flatten the menu or we're going to create this mega menu because we really need to accommodate a lot of content, I think it's important in the design process to step back a bit and think more just about wayfinding in general. Because believe it or not, people can find content even if it's not in the menu. There are other ways for people to discover content through your site. And the whole goal of navigation, the whole goal of wayfinding, is just to help users find their way efficiently through your content. So I hope you can see all this text at the back, but these are all the different ways that users can find, can discover content on your site. So if you really want someone to see a piece of information, the easiest way is just to put it on every single page of your website. No clicks required, like a zero-click pathway to the most important information. So you saw the, you saw the admission hours here. Like that's the idea with that. We're just sticking that on every page. We don't expect people to click. If an alert or notification would be another way of doing that. Navigation and links. So if it's something that you think is part of the user journey, you're going to make a link to it more or less prominent. So putting it in the main menu is fairly prominent, but obviously a CTA on the homepage would do the job. It's hard to put a CTA on every single page of your site. And then there's other things like links within your content, suggested items, other kinds of links you can consider. And then finally, if you think that this content, people if they really need it, they can find it. They can just use the search. They can look in our chat bot. So if the content is less important and actually you don't think it's part of anybody's user journey, but you need it to be there as a reference, or for example, you have a website where you are mandated to have certain content published, there are of course other ways to make the content available or content that's available through a campaign. So there's all these ways of wayfinding. So actually the decision is more complex in that, it's not just does something go in the menu or not, it's how do we create the best pathways to our content. And so we use often a technique called user journey mapping. And in fact, on any project I've been in when we've skipped this stage, there's always a point where we go back and say, why didn't we do user journey mapping? It would have really helped us answer this question. In even projects where we kind of inherit the project from someone else who's been working on it, we're always looking for, where's the user journey map? How do we actually decide what content is going to go where? And so if you haven't done an exercise like this, this is really should be the way that you decide or it should be information that you use to decide what goes into your menu. It's a kind of easy rubric to follow. You are thinking through in the column. I know you can't see all these little things, but there's a whole bunch of virtual sticky notes. There's columns for the different steps that we want users to go through as they interact with our website or with us virtually in general. And then we have different things that we're tracking, like what emotions is the user having, what questions are they asking, what are the key content touch points that we're providing them, either on other channels or on the website itself, and then what are some opportunities, like some obvious things that they're missing at that step. And then we use that information to figure out, like, and you can kind of see the emojis where we're seeing like, oh yeah, this is actually a really key touch point. And we can use this kind of map to then apply to our menu and see, oh, if someone's actually going to go through all these steps of discovering our website, starting to maybe research what we do, then take the first step of interacting with us, can they actually do that? And how does the menu support their journey? And so just as an example, and this is important to decide what to include and what not to include in your menu, this is a menu that we created for a research foundation. So they provide money for really important fundamental research, research infrastructure. So like you can imagine research labs and things like that. So people are applying for grants. And so the main journey that they just want to enable, they know, number one is helping people figure out which grant to apply for and what they need to do to fill in their application. So apply and manage your awards is actually the main journey there. And for this particular menu item, they've split it out into, not just 2 levels, but they're listing every funding opportunity. They don't do this for the other menu items. It's just this special menu item. It's the number one thing. We just want to put all the information there and reduce a click for every single person, every single researcher applying for a grant. About Us is there because people kind of expect that information, and people, the public doesn't really know what this foundation does. They didn't want to hide that away. But it's not a complex menu, it's just a couple menu items. And then the funded projects and results are there for like policymakers who want to know, where is all this money going? And that section also is pretty flat. So what's interesting, I think, about this menu is what's not there. They hid the Get Involved link up in the top level. They actually rely on people to go and participate in these grant application reviews. So they need people to get involved, but they know that people aren't doing that by coming to their website and finding a menu item. They know that they have to actually go and email those people. So they're not kidding themselves. They don't think that has to be front and center. And then things like news, okay, that's nice. It's news about the organization, but it's not the most important thing for any primary audience. So again, that's not cluttering up our main nav. And so, yeah, what I love about this menu is that there's 3 menu items, and then they haven't made the decision to be like, oh, we're going to put everything or nothing under each one. It's kind of a explicit decision. And another thing that this organization doesn't put in their main menu are these research topics that they've decided. They've said, oh, we're going to do thought leadership in these specific areas. This is what we're going to highlight on our website. But these aren't things that they've figured that they have to put in the main navigation because, again, it's not part of anybody's primary goal in going to this website. So instead, they add this content to other journeys. So as you're going and researching the grants, or as you're going to see what projects this organization has completed, you come across these topic areas and you can see what kind of thought leadership they do. So you can go through this process and see, okay, what are our journeys? What needs to go into the menu? What needs to stay out? And then you come up with your proposed menu. And then the thing about a menu is that it's easy to change, but you kind of shouldn't change it. Like, have you ever been to a website where they've just changed the menu and you're like, oh, where is that one link that I always go to? And it's a frustrating experience. So it's not the type of thing you just want to like play with. all the time. Like your other content, you can experiment, but the menu, you want to be a bit more sure. So tree testing is helpful for this. So it's a type of usability testing that you just run on the navigation. You come up with your proposed menu, you maybe have a couple variations, and then you ask users to try it out, and you can use Optimal Workshop to automate this and just give a link so people can do it in their own time asynchronously. And then you can see the results, like how many clicks did it take them, did they accomplish their goal of finding the content in the menu. And so this is a really nice, easy usability test to do. So in terms of this question of flattening the navigation, what are the key takeaways? So designing a big menu can be kind of expensive. I don't know, like getting it to work on mobile, getting all the images right. It's a big undertaking, and so changing your menu can be expensive. But that said, changing the links in your menu is one of the cheapest things you can do. You know, if you don't have permission to do it already, it's easy for somebody on your team, right, to just go and change the link label or move it around. That said, you don't want to experiment all the time, so the tree testing is a nice way to test in advance. Okay, we're ready for the next topic. Who here has written or read an RFP for a big, website project in the last 10 years? Yeah, so that RFP, I can almost guarantee you, had some reference to this idea of storytelling content. Oh, we need to have more visual content on our site that really tells the story of our organization. This is such a compelling idea because we're all, we're tired of reading walls of text, and we know that our users don't like it. It's an obvious feedback that we might receive on a website that was built a few years ago. And so we want our content to be more engaging. So when people are talking about storytelling content in terms of websites, what they're usually talking about is this mixture of different kinds of media, like they want to integrate video into their content, they want to have images, they want to have big, bold text. They want the content to feel more alive and engaged. Sometimes they're talking about really interactive elements like timeline or a quiz, and sometimes it's this combination of content and layout that makes the page more interesting to look at. Kind of like my slides here, I tried to not use the same slide template for each one. Similar thing you want to do on your website. So I think of it as like a picture book for your website where you're really trying to tell a story. And so often when it comes down to designing the website, what that storytelling content translates into is the need to design these components. So who has components on their site? You've got paragraphs, you've got blocks, you've got layout builder going on. Maybe you're into Gutenberg, Gutenberg for Drupal. And so this is all the rage, like, oh, we need to design these components. So there's a point at every project where we think, okay, what is the list of components we have, or what already exists on the website that we have to redesign? And we're really focused on the visual of the components and how each one looks. But when I step back and look at the finished product of a website, I kind of, I feel like it's less about the components and more about the flow. So storytelling actually isn't just about designing, one page of a kid's picture book. It's about the flow of how you turn the pages and the story is told, and what happens at the end, how does the story kind of guide you in. And so deciding what order the components go in and what combination is going to look good on a page is equally important. And we can think about this in terms of telling a narrative, like what information do I need to get first before I can maybe make my decision and click on a link at the, further down the page. But it's also about visually how it draws you in, like the rhythm of the page. So are there any real designers in the room? Like anyone have Figma open more than any other application? Oh, not too many designers. Okay. I used to be a designer. I designed our company logo, but they haven't really let me design anything in a while. So I recently relearned Figma. It's a superpower. Highly recommend it. But I like to critique the designs, and what always gets me is like, oh, we designed all these great components, and they're so intense. You know, you see some of these visuals, and there's like a fully saturated image, and sometimes it's too much of that. We think storytelling content, we just have to put lots of video and images, and the page gets really heavy. So it's also just about creating a page that flows well and has a mix of, you know, white space, and depending on your actual design, what's going to look like a balanced content. What also strikes me about this page is how much work it must be to create. Like, how many clicks do you think it took somebody to build this in Drupal? Throw out a number. Number of clicks to build this page. 834, I wouldn't be surprised, because the person probably didn't know which components to use the first time round, and they added a bunch. And if they were using Layout Builder, you know, that was a whole bunch of extra clicks, because you got to click through all the options. Paragraphs also has a fair number of clicks, and it kind of depends on how you have it configured in the back end. But yeah, depending on how many rounds you went through, there's already, you know, 7 components here. That could be quite a few clicks. And imagine you have to translate this piece of content into another language. Like, it really explodes. So storytelling content is extremely expensive. And I'm not just talking about like it takes time to take the pictures and design the page. I'm talking about like the time it takes for the content editor to create and maintain this thing. And then to do that again and again for all the content on the website that has to be engaging. It's harder to update. It's actually harder to search, because you'd have to plan out how search would work with this content to make sure that the search, you know, search API could like get into all these pieces. Harder to migrate, because imagine like you're going to see at some point a really cool demo at this conference about Experience Builder, and you're going to want it. And then you're going to think, how am I going to migrate all of this to Experience Builder? And then you also have to get the flow and the balance right. So you're going to get more feedback, guaranteed, from your colleagues about what this looks like. You know, as a content editor, it's going to be harder for you to get the flow and the balance right than if you had just maybe written a more simple piece of text. That said, the page looks great. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that if we're creating pages like this, probably shouldn't be every page of your website. You know, you should probably be realistic about the pages that require this amount of customization and thinking and planning. You know, like on this page, this is a really important page because it's trying to tell the story of how this university does research. They're trying to attract researchers. That's their #1 goal. So of course they're going to take their time to create this page, but it doesn't mean that they should create 20 such pages, and certainly not 100. So how do we avoid that? We can avoid it by creating templates. So who here has like little ones that they might read books to, like picture books? Anyone read a picture book in the last 10 years? So you might notice that like some of the picture books are super unique, but a lot of them are just like copy-paste jobs where there's like a whole series of like 10 of these picture books that have exactly the same storyline. And they just kind of like swapped out some images or characters, and the kids are totally happy. So we can do the same trick on our websites. It turns out that content types are like this really innovative feature in Drupal. But content types don't have to be boring. So content types can also have really interesting and engaging components that tell a story. And if we plan it out for really valuable content types, so this is a website for OCAD University, which is the RISD of Canada. It's the premier design school in Canada, in Toronto, and it has these really interesting programs, and they wanted to make the content more engaging. They added student stories. They highlighted certain CTAs, and they created this. And if you actually go to the website, it doesn't screenshot as well as all that. But if you go through, there's a bit of an animation and a subtle video, and it actually is quite compelling. And so they created this program content, and then it's easy. You can create that within a template. And then the website only has to have a handful of customized landing pages that use components. And these can be spun up much much more quickly. One kind of in-between option between a completely customized page that you've built that tells your story and a templated version is a content type that maybe gives you a bit more flexibility in terms of your components. So I like this one because it's like a travel website. So this is a website we built for a set of parks. So you can go explore the parks, but you can also plan your road trip around the park you're going to visit. And maybe you want to like go to a couple parks on your road trip. So these are like long road trips. Like you want to spend 24 hours driving up to the Yukon, you go to this up to the Northwest Territories. You can go to this website and plan such a trip and see all the scenery you're gonna find up there. But each road trip, of course, might have different stops on the way, and you can't quite create a template out of it. Each one is a little bit too distinct. But there are some, best practices like, okay, we want to have enough balance of images so you can see what it's going to be like, but you also need some instructions so you don't get lost. We don't want people to get lost on their 24-hour road trip up north. So that's another option. And then the final thing I would recommend in this category is looking at one key interaction on your website. Like maybe there's something that just needs a little bit more to spark the user's imagination. So when we talk about digital storytelling, sometimes we're also talking about that real interactivity. So this is an interesting website because it's a government website that tries to attract new people to join the trades. And that means they're not really competing with anyone. Like they're just trying to promote this to encourage people to find a career and fill a gap in industry. But they do just need to attract more people. And there's a lot of people who go into the trades and they don't have anyone in their family who's done that, so they don't really know what they're getting into. And it kind of walks them through a quiz to help them maybe find a trade that would be interesting to them. So when it says my power is going to die. I'll try. I'll make sure this doesn't happen. And so we didn't go and build a quiz builder. We said, no, there's just one quiz that's the most important, and everyone can just use that quiz. So it doesn't have to be this super flexible thing that's a whole quiz platform. It's just one interaction. We focused on that. So that's a way you can kind of quickly create great storytelling content. Yeah, so just some takeaways that are hopefully practical. Selective storytelling, like choosing which content you apply components to and not just giving people the whole library of components they can pick for any page. Using some templated stories. And then actually another thing I didn't mention, but creating some documentation to explain which component to use when and to give a bit more context rather than just a technical guide when you're explaining like what the different paragraph types, for example, are on your site. It's an opportunity to infuse some content strategy into your technical docs. All right, I think we're ready for the next trend, design systems. So who here looked at the schedule this week and said, oh, I have to go to that session on design systems? Yeah. Is it on anyone's roadmap? Yeah, I have to think about a design system. Yeah, I think it's such a compelling idea. And I think the reason that everybody's excited about design systems is because everybody actually has a big, or everybody could improve their governance, right? Everybody has some issue with like, oh, I wish our website did a better job of like making sure that people create accessible content, or we need to encourage people to follow our brand guidelines, or we need to get everybody on the same page in terms of content strategy. It's hard to wrangle those people and get them all to do the same thing. And so design system, the dream of design system is that it's going to actually solve all our problems and just say, here's what all the content on the website should look like, and everyone's just going to follow that, whether they're creating a Drupal site or a WordPress site or whatever it is. But actually, a lot of people considering design systems, they don't have multiple sites or they don't have multiple teams creating sites. They're just trying to wrangle their governance. And so it might not be the most appropriate solution. And other people want to create a design system, but they haven't planned ahead for that governance. So maybe they create the design system, but they don't realize that then you have a design system that you also have to maintain. So if you build a design system and then you build a website, and then you actually have to keep both of those things up to date. And hopefully the design system is going to help you manage your website and make it consistent in the future, but it's still like a whole separate project. And so it's something to think about. And maybe there's some other tools that you could consider for managing that governance. So one tool you can use is a DAM, digital asset management. Like maybe the real problem isn't that people are going off and creating buttons that don't look like buttons. Maybe the problem is that they're not using imagery that's aligned with your brand. And so creating a DAM that has some images in it that they can use on multiple channels, maybe that's going to be a more appropriate solution. In other cases, you really have to look at a design system and think this is what we need. So if you have websites with different brand variations, for example, and you want to provide some different options to site owners, but you want to make sure that they stay within your brand, design systems are really, really helpful for this. If you have multiple platforms, multiple CMSs, design systems can be really helpful. I'll share one little story from a client we've worked with, York University. They have, like many universities, they have hundreds or thousands of websites. I'm not actually sure. And a lot of these sites are on WordPress. And so they created a whole library of what they call modules, much to my chagrin. I wish these were called components. We can call them components. There's 42. So they have quite a few to pick from, and these are documented on a website. So it's pretty nice. If you're going to go create a website on their platform, you can go and see what all the components are and figure out which ones make the most sense. And you can see examples. So like they have a nice documentation. But one challenge is that we got to work on a couple Drupal websites for this client. And so we had the job of translating these into Drupal. So right there, it would be nice to have, for us to create a design system, because then these can continue to evolve, and they'll be the same in WordPress and Drupal, and they'll be documented more consistently, and documented more for a developer audience. So right now, the way these are documented, you can see on the left, like digging into one component, might be useful if you're going to use these as a site builder, but it would be hard to go and know all the specs behind them to go and redevelop them on another platform. So that's when something like Storybook, a proper design system, could be useful. And then, we had one really cool project for this client. We worked with their design school. It's fun. We get to do a few projects for design schools. It's always interesting because they want to think outside the box and do something cool. And so these folks at the design school said, yeah, we want to go and create some custom components. We can't, like 42, it's not just that it's not enough, but we want them to be a little bit more, have a little bit more pop, pizzazz. So like, hopefully this page gets across that kind of more confident look that we were going for. And so we created some cool ones, and it would be fun to like contribute those back to the 42 and make them available. And that would be a process that a design system could facilitate. So if we're planning ahead for that, design systems can be a really useful tool. So my advice here is think through your governance first. Like before you create a design system is actually a whole project. So who are you creating the design system for? Are you creating it for your core team, the colleagues you work directly with? Is it for other teams? Is it for new projects you're creating? So thinking through how it's going to be used, how it's going to be maintained, thinking through what governance problems you're going to solve, and is it really the best solution. Yeah, considering your landscape, your users, and the channels. So like maybe you have an issue with your social media, how your content looks there. Anywhere where your brand is presented on digital, and that's, you know, the problem your design system is trying to solve also is that consistency. And then start simple. Like, it's a big investment to create a design system. It's expensive. So maybe a first step instead could be looking at, you know, do we have a style guide that's useful? Have we done a brand audit that could just help us resolve some of these issues? And maybe starting with that if you're not sure that a design system is going to have the return on investment. Okay, last one. And this is to check the checkbox of AI being brought up in every single talk. But actually, Revenge of the Homepage, I just stole this phrase from a New Yorker article all about this trend towards having algorithms online that are kind of taking over and saying, oh yeah, SEO, we find our content through SEO. Why do we even go to a website anymore? And this, made me very nervous, like this idea of people aren't going to use websites anymore. This idea kind of got me thinking recently because I heard about Google's AI mode. Has anybody heard of this? Yeah, so here's the idea. Like, you go to use Google like you do, and Google's actually going to be doing an even better job of trying to answer your question without you clicking on any links. So then why do I even need to go to a website? So as a person who creates websites, of course, it gets you thinking, are people even going to go to my website anymore? How can my website take back the authority of being a resource that people actually need to visit? What makes it convincing for a user to go there? And so I think it's worth stepping back and thinking, and this kind of ties into the user journeys I was talking about earlier, but really going to the question of how do users arrive at your content in the first place? And sometimes we don't think too much about it. We think, oh yeah, obviously users have to go to our website because it's our website. They want to interact with us as an organization. The website's the obvious digital front door. But they might be coming to your website through links, through search. They might just be using AI to access that content and never touching your site. And which technique they use might depend on the type of research they're doing. So, for example, if a user is just doing some casual research, like what am I going to do on my trip to Atlanta? They might not feel the need to actually go to a website to access that information. ChatGPT might just fulfill all their needs. But if they're going to be looking for a credible source, like they're looking for specific product information or program requirements or health advice, they're probably going to be looking at that information a little bit more carefully. Sometimes they might be looking for timely updates, like they want to know what your organization's publishing right now. And sometimes they're actually using the website to build an impression. Like, they want to get to know your organization, they want to know if they can trust you, so they're going there to actually see what you're all about and what your brand looks like. So you can look at how they're getting into your website and also what kind of information they're interested in. And you can think about experiences that they can only get through your website. So that's an interesting thing to step back and think about. Like, if you're building a website or you're running a website, what do users have to go to your website to find? So I'll give you a few examples. So this is a website, Drupal site for a big insurance company. I think it's the biggest insurance company in Canada. Second biggest. Oh. And so it's a big insurance company. And they have calculators, like every insurance company website. And so you can go through, and it's a very interactive experience, and you're going to see how much is it going to cost to insure my snowmobile. Oh, this is a very Canadian example. I didn't even notice that. Or maybe you are here in Atlanta, you're Georgia Tech. This is the Georgia Tech Library website that our team also redesigned, and it has, of course, like every library, you want to go there to find the resources. So it has this digital search. So this is something you really do have to go to the website to see. It putting all those resources in one place. It's like a confederated search where you could kick off a search to one of many different tools. So of course, you can Google things, but if you want to know what you have access to through your university library, you would need to come here. And then this is an interactive tool that you might use to plan a trip. Again, maybe a road trip, but maybe just you want to go up to visit Montreal and you're planning what you can do, and you can plan the trip out on a map. And so, again, like an AI or a search tool is not going to give you the same quality as this on-site search. So really investing, again, in the on-site search and the types of custom filters and displays that you might have. And then you might think, oh boy, these examples all sound like a lot of work. Like I have to build a custom map, I have to create like a little interactive quiz or a tool. But it could be as simple as like the type of curated content and thought leadership that you have. So making your website actually a trusted destination for this and thinking through, okay, maybe this is content people are going to access through my social channels, through my newsletters, and this is content that, maybe they can research the topics elsewhere, but the type of opinionated pieces that we're creating are actually unique, and the fact that they're coming from us has meaning. And in a world of algorithms where, LinkedIn's just trying to show you stuff you're going to click on, or, AI tools are just trying to give you a generic answer that's going to, make you think you know the answer. Having an actual opinionated source of content can be really valuable. So you might think of that as a good purpose of your website and some specific content that you want to focus on investing in to achieve that. So some takeaways here. Mapping out your journeys are important, and really specifically looking at where users are coming into your site, where they're starting their quest for information. Figuring out what your high-value touch points are, things people can only do through your site, and then thinking of how you can make your website actually a destination for people, and what that looks like and what success would look like for you. And so we've covered 4 trends of things that you may or may not want to do, but I wanted to leave you with a more consolidated set of advice. So if you're not going back to your office on Monday to redesign your website using all these trends, what are you going to do on Monday? So I was thinking, looking at your user journey mapping. Maybe you've done this before, but it's a good thing to refresh, or ask questions of your colleagues. Did we ever do that? Is that something we could leverage to focus our work? Then actually figuring out from that mapping, what are the key content touch points? What's unique to us? What's the storytelling content we want to focus on? What's actually the most valuable thing on our website? What's our gold star, or the gem that we have in our jewelry box? And then how can you support the governance of that? Like, look at how that's being maintained. Look at how you could improve the documentation for creating that content. Look at how you can change the review processes around publishing it or writing it or adding visuals to it. So rather than trying to break off your whole website and going back and improving every little thing and adding all your 20 modules you've thought of, what's one touch point that you can improve? And then how do you create governance to make sure the value stays over time? So these are the three pieces of advice, the 3 things you can take away, and hopefully you can use this as a filter for other trends and ideas that you hear about in the next couple days. So thank you all, and I have one last thing. If you like DrupalCon, but DrupalCon's kind of big and you want kind of more things but local events, Evolving Web's organizing this series of events called Evolve Drupal. So you can go to evolvedrupal.com to find out more about those. We've done them in New York, one in Atlanta, and there's one coming up in Boston in June. So another event to get you excited and share more of these ideas. And I hope I have like a minute for Q&A. And I also have my email there. You can email me questions. Any questions? Yes.
I'm curious, especially I was thinking about this with the first, the navigation and the mega menu. How much do you consider, say, captive audience? 90% of our users come to our site from a specific, like, they put in the name of our organization and then a very specific topic, and they get directly to what they want from Google. Have you considered that sort of captive audience when thinking about that sort of navigation?
Yeah, absolutely. So if there's users that are coming in more from organic search or organic sources, then then you have to think, then where do they go from there? Like, does that page actually go and direct them to the thing you want them to do? Because maybe they're going to a series of blog posts, but the blog posts are kind of dead ends, and they don't actually feed into, interacting with you or seeing more the services you offer. So making that content more visible on the page. And it is likely that if someone comes into your site through, to a specific page that answers their question, they're just going to click back or go on with their search. So putting something into the navigation isn't going to be sufficient, and having something more directly on the page that's going to prompt them to act is going to be important. So it's a good area to actually experiment, maybe trying a new wayfinding technique and then seeing if that changes your analytics. Yes?
So I think we're like a lot of websites, our organic search is down 10, 20%, probably with AI and the search results.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the top 1, 2 ideas to tell your higher level managers who are panicking at the stats and the red line, so we don't just overreact and just start mutating our website in random ways? How can we be calm, measured? I know you gave a lot of great ideas, but
Yeah.
specifically in that case.
Yeah. How do you, people who are just looking at the analytics? Yeah. I think that just if the only data that you have are analytics, then it can be a problem because you're not going to be able to answer the question of why. And so trying to complement that with some other kind of data, even if it's just, surveying some of your actual users and targeting more not just the general traffic of your site, which includes lots of people that you probably don't care about as much, but more like, who are the real target users of this site, and are we responding to their needs? And then also just stepping back and looking like that map of like, how do users get into your site, and not relying on search means you actually have to maybe double down on some of the other areas. I don't know what kind of website you have, so it's hard for me to be specific. But like, as an example, we are doing some work for climatedata.ca. Yes, climatedata.ca. So it's this really interesting resource of information about impact of climate change, and it's not really, it's not necessarily a site that a ton of people have bookmarked. Like, researchers know about it, but like, how do we just make this website more available to people? And so that's not just going to happen through organic search, because there's just so much information and misinformation. And so it required more of a like, no, we actually have to double down and do a campaign and do that more thoughtfully. So could depend on the use case there. Any other thoughts or? Yes.
How much is accessibility? Like, when is it a part of the design phase?
Okay. And I realized I'm supposed to repeat the question. So when is accessibility, when does it come into play as part of like the design phase? So we should be thinking about accessibility at every step in the process. And in terms of the design phase, even when we're just taking a project, if our team's working on a project for the first time and there's brand guidelines already there, the first thing we think about when we look at those guidelines is, are they going to allow us to create accessible interfaces, accessible content? It could be like the new, quick reason to look at Drupal.org. There's a redesign of Drupal.org that just happened, and you might notice that the colors are not just blue anymore. There's other colors. So when you have like a big color palette as part of your brand guidelines, it's very likely that there are accessibility issues that can come into play because you have all these different button states and link states and colors that people want to use and different backgrounds and gradients. And so having some guidelines, maybe the first step is actually to adjust the brand guidelines to make sure that they have enough guidance to create accessible designs, accessible content. So that might be the very first thing, all the way through to when you're actually building those components, do the content publishers have a tool like Editorially, which is a module? You can add that to your list of the 20 modules to try out when you get back to the office. Editorially, which is to check, is your content accessible when you're actually, at the step of publishing it. Did you create some HTML or something, or embed a video and make your site not accessible somehow?
And when are the developers like part of this process? Like when you work with the institution, what does the team look like? When the developers
Yeah, so question about when the developers get involved in all of this. Well, they're involved in a lot of things, so I'll just touch on one of the elements where you should definitely get developers involved. It's looking back at the design of the components. So when we looked at that page, well, I'll just go back to it. When we look at designing, like, what are all these components going to be that make up our beautiful landing pages? This is a great design for a future state. Like, we really need to attract new researchers, so this is the perfect content for our new site. But it might ignore the fact that you have an existing website. And your existing website at this point is likely to already have components. So if you have a lot of that content, if you have a lot of existing content and technical stuff in place, you have to have a map for the current state to the future state. So seeing, like, do we already have some components that we should be redesigning? Do we have new ones that we need to add? That's a process where you should start to get developers involved in doing an assessment. And so usually we have a technical discovery that goes alongside all this kind of user journey mapping, and it makes sure that we take into account what exists, what technical tools are needed, and then what are the technical requirements of the new system. So there's a lot to look at there as well. Okay, so thanks so much, everyone, for coming out, and feel free to find me later to continue the conversation. Enjoy the rest of your con.